Sure. No, happy to be here with you all, and especially on your 15th anniversary. The goal for our session today is simply to try to build some understanding about how listening architectures work within organizations, how you can take stock and audit your own listening architecture at your organization to see how it is collecting and helping with the work that you do, the important work that you do. And I thank you for that good work for the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Our key questions will be, how do we listen to our stakeholders, and what should happen after we do the listening? And how do you build this robust system for listening, and how is that connected to an organization's reputation? I want to start with the why in terms of we want to be in a we space with the people we serve, with our customers, with our stakeholders. So how do we manufacture and create that we space? We have to, I think, put together myself and whoever I'm listening to, and we create the space together. And I think that having a we space means that everybody is in the game, especially for the work that you're doing around conservation. You want as many people to be on the conservation team as possible. So there is no them, there is only us. I talk about this with my students all the time. I think sometimes when we're inside of organizations, we talk about outsiders as them and ourselves as us, and this sets up a dichotomy that I don't think is very useful. And so if you can have that we and that us mentality, you can move forward, I think, in better ways, and people can hear that when you talk with them or listen to them. They know that you are in the we space with them, that you're not in a separate space from them. So how does your organization listen? I would love to hear a few responses in the chat, although now I'm not going to be able to deal with that. So I would love for you to place some responses in the chat, and maybe we can talk about this toward the end of our time together when I'm just back up on screen and I'm done with the slideshow. But think about the many ways that your organization listens already and where you're doing very intentional listening. Those are the types of things I'm looking for. Typically, when we have listening going on, we can round up the usual suspects. So here they are. You know, in your planning or in any of the guidebooks or protocols that you have, you may be calling listening other things like feedback or input or complaints or those types of things. But you want to, I think, upgrade your language to include the word listening alongside these other terms or in lieu of these other terms, because I think listening places us in a different part of the communication model. Instead of outsider, we are engaged, and we are also open to change. Oftentimes the people within our organizations that are helping us listen are in call centers. They may be frontline or public facing employees, the managers who handle complaints. You're doing a lot of listening, and maybe in meetings that you're having inside your own organization or with community members, with partners, through email. Elected officials probably give you a lot of information that you're listening to, and also your colleagues, internal stakeholders too. So I really do believe that listening is sort of a foundational piece of any type of engagement plan. So how would you conduct an audit like this? And I will be happy to share the slideshow with Dustin and Helen so that they can share it with you. So you don't have to grab all this right now, but you know, who has listening as part of their job description? Is the word listening, feedback, and those types of terms in job descriptions? And if this word is not in those job descriptions, where does it belong? Where are people already doing it so that you can make their job description better and more inclusive of all the work they're doing? And where should it be? And how do you start thinking about that for your organization? How do you onboard new employees to help them become good listeners when they join your organization? So that inboard training would be very important. Current employees who may not have had that as part of their job or may not have seen that as an explicit part of their job would need to be retrained or would need to receive training about listening. Where is crucial listening already occurring, and where should it be occurring? And that's how you start identifying the pieces of the architecture that you have. Who rounds up all of the results from listening? Who sees the patterns and looks at this as an analyst? How do they help solve problems because of what they've learned from listening? Who is or who could be your organization's listener in chief? Is that your executive director, or are those department managers? who are the listeners in chief or the listener in chief, and who has the ultimate responsibility for listening? I talk a lot about public information requests, which I know you all get as well. What if we had, instead of a public information request, we were asked to reveal everything that we had listened to when people told us things we needed to know, and yet we didn't act on those things? This is what a listener in chief would take stock of, is listening to everything that's coming in and making sure that you're attending to all those details. We spend a lot of time, I think, developing outbound channels, but I think we should redirect resources to develop and use inbound channels. And I think this will help our branding, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but the list of inbound channels should be as long or longer than your outbound channels. You may not have new resources coming in. And so if you're going to build this list of inbound channels and make sure people are along those channels and listening, you may have to shift away from that outbound communication that you're used to doing and doing instead thinking about providing good customer or people experiences when you're building trust and linkages and solutions as you're working with the community. So this is the brand connection. Your brand is in the mind of the people that you serve. It is not your logo. It is not all of your formal communication packages or your videos. It is in the minds of the people you serve. And so you've got to remember that that's where branding exists. I've been reading a book recently by Rashad Tabakawala, and it's called Restoring the Soul of Business and Staying Human in the Age of Data. And he talks about the fact that the future does not fit the containers of the past. We are used to doing outbound communication, perhaps if we are communicators or if we are directing programs or we're doing educational programming for the community. We're used to talking with them and talking at them and developing materials to share with them. I don't know that those containers are very good for us going forward if that's all we're doing. And so I just wanted to bring this up as a way to kind of shift your thinking. A couple of books, one is the one I just talked about by Rashad Tabakawala, and the other one is Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and he also wrote a really great book called Leaders Eat Last. But these two books together talk about making sure that we're doing and thinking about experiences over communication. So in other words, what is the experience of people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area when they are interacting with your organization and when you are working in partnership with them on conservation ideas or on water, other types of water activities or programming? What is their experience like? Not so much what are you communicating to them, but what is their experience in the system of listening to you and of being listened to by everybody in your organization. Every single person in your organization is a brand ambassador in this sort of model. Everything needs to be purpose driven. So we talked about that at the very beginning. You know, why are we doing this work that you're doing? Why does it matter? It's going to be crucial to our lives in the future. And so those are things that we want to think about. When I talked in our very first session that got interrupted, you know, I think about this all the time with my older daughter who works in sustainability at a university in Washington, D.C. And we talk about these issues all the time. Everyone's talking about these issues, and people who are looking down the road are talking about climate migration, living in places that have good supplies of water. We know a lot of Californians are coming to Texas and other places because of problems out west that are also our problems as well. And the last one that Rashad Tabakawala talks a lot about is employee joy. If employees are working for your organization, but they're really not all in, then that's a problem. And so making sure that you're doing good internal listening and good internal culture building, making sure they feel part of the team. And if they feel like they have a purpose-driven job, they are going to make experiences great for the people they're working with in the community. Rashad tells a story in his book about Southwest Airlines and how, you know, when you're on a flight with them, oftentimes the pilot might come on and tell you the score of a game that everybody's interested in because of the destination that you've just left from or the place that you're going. And he makes a direct connection with United Airlines, which has a lot of high employee turnover, hasn't been as profitable consistently as Southwest Airlines has a lot of other issues going on that you all know about with customer service, especially. And those pilots are never going to come in and do that. And so what kind of culture are you building? How do employees move about in that culture? And what is the experience of the public when they come in contact with you and your colleagues? I think we can talk about, just for a few minutes, that public participation is an empty ritual. The 3 minutes that people get at meetings, these artificial ways that we've built in our democracy for people to give us input are very bad. They're anemic at best. And sometimes I think they can be dangerous because we're blocking people. People get angry. We only give them 3 minutes. We're not really listening. We're just ticking the box and saying that we listen, and the decision has already been made. We haven't included people in decision making. And so this empty ritual is, I think, something that we've got to look at with new eyes and say we can do better. And that can't just be what we're doing here. Oftentimes elected officials and appointed officials really don't want to deal with the public, and they want you to do that. I understand all of that. I think our experiences with stopwatch listening have got to stop. So here are 6 ideas for better listening. Then I'm going to give you a few theories that go behind these ideas, and then we'll be done. I think we want to phase out town hall types of listening experiences where people sit on a podium and they're like they're the king or the queen, and you're getting granted an audience with them. We've got to get rid of that. And I think we want to, use trained listeners in breakout rooms and sessions like we have today, or in real breakout rooms in physical spaces where we can break into smaller groups and truly listen to people who are our constituents and stakeholders. I think we want to tune down the voices of the trolls and the constant complainers out there. Not that we're not going to listen to them, but they get undue attention, and oftentimes people have, sort of thin skins and respond to them in ways really that we shouldn't. We need to do a better job of doing scientific surveying or polling of residents, of stakeholders, of people, to find out what representative input looks like and what does that tell us to do. Instead of celebrations and state of the utility, state of the city types of gatherings that are really for elites, where people pay $25 or $100 to show up, or we have companies buy tables. Instead of that, I think we need to meet neighbors in their neighborhoods at their own events and include that as part of it. We might not be able to get rid of that sort of back patting stuff that I think is phony, but we can do better at meeting people where they are. One-way digital messaging and toxic spaces, we still have to deal with those things, but I think we want to make sure we're doing face-to-face. We don't want to keep pushing out things that we've been doing for years and years. We want to really interrogate those practices and maybe switch them around into making communicators be the ears of your city's administrators or your utilities administrators and those types of things, and get rid of that 3-minute comment and do shorter but multiple structured inputs. There's 3 types of listening that sort of underlie this new way of thinking about a listening architecture and how you should be listening. That have been recorded in the literature and through tons of listening research. And I'm just going to sort of summarize those for you. There's sort of an empathetic or compassionate listening model. I think it's good to console people, but it's probably really bad for solutions. You might feel better. The person who you're listening to might feel better because they've gotten it all out, but it doesn't necessarily lead to solutions and changes. I think there's a lot of stonewall listening going on. This is called Cataphatic Listening by Anthony Dobson, in a book about democracy and listening that he wrote in 2014. This is what the kings and landowners used to do back in medieval times, and it's oppressive and privileged. It means you talk, I have to listen, I'm watching the clock, and I'm really not open to change. The last one, of course, is the one we want to always push toward, and that's Zen listening. I am still. I don't talk. You get the mic and I listen to you. I lay down my power and control, and I am open to change. True listening results in change. And so we have to be open to that transformation by our stakeholders of the things we're doing. They can help us find solutions. They can help us if we think about better ways of doing representative listening and deep listening. There's a small chart built on that model. We, of course, want to be in the green space rather than the yellow or the red. The top left one is the so sorry we messed up model, perhaps, or we want to do better, with your help we will. Those might not be in the same statement. They may be in 2 separate types of statements depending on the type of input you're receiving, but it's stillness plus solutions. The other ones happen, and sometimes you don't have a lot of choices, but you always want to be pushing toward that Zen listening or the green block here. And this is a good model to go through with your colleagues to figure out what types of listening you're doing currently and how you could change once you get this architecture built. What's happening in that architecture? This is how you discern that. And so an exercise for your team might be, think of a time when your agency has used one of those modes of listening, and how might you push towards Zen and get better at doing Zen. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm happy to take a couple of questions, and would be happy just to have a discussion about some of the ideas I've been able to share with you. I'd like to do some listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Lambiase. We had, regarding your responses to your question, how does your organization listen? We had surveys mentioned, Google Form surveys on specific programs and participations, and social media as well. So those are some responses, and I think some of those were listed in some of your examples as well. A few questions have come in, and do you have any suggestions or activities to create or for your team to create or develop their why? Anything that can help that process?
Right. I think, just having the conversation about what are we doing here? I mean, we do this a lot at TCU, like everything we do is for our students, right? Everything you all do is for the residents of the Dallas-Fort Worth area of this region. And I think you can look at your mission statements, and vision and value statements are good places to begin to make sure that those are in order, and that the language that's used there is current and maybe includes things like equity or inclusion. But I think those are obviously values of listening. How do you listen to people who may have been marginalized in the past? We know that across the country, there's lots of issues with water and equity, right? And so I think figuring out why you're there, you're not there for the loudest complainer, you're not there for the wealthiest user of water or the biggest cities, but you're there for every community, every person. And how do you sort of foster dialogue within your organization to build that culture so that everyone sees that every day? And so when people speak to the public, they are always having that in mind, and you develop together, I think, kind of a culture and a lingo, and it takes some time to build this. So start with the mission, vision, and values that you may already have on paper, and branch out from there and see how big you can make those reaches for the why.
Great. All right, kind of diving into listening itself. It may seem like a basic question, but how do you listen?
I mean, it's really interesting. We've gotten probably worse at listening because of our mobile devices and things like that, where we're looking at other things and we think we're multitasking and we're really not. Even in the days before that technology, I think people only listened with about 40% efficiency. Sometimes it's as low as 25% efficiency. And so I think things that I do to help my listening is I think a lot of us are listening to podcasts perhaps. And I think that helps us really tune up our listening skills because we're really focused on one thing. And so those types of experiences, I think, help us. How can we bring that same attention to the people around us? And I think it means that we aren't, we might have a meeting where there's only one or two things on the agenda, and you're building space for people to talk about things that maybe you haven't had time to talk about within your organization and on your team. And so those are some ideas for getting started with listening, where I think it may take people some time to figure out that their voice is valued, and they may be hesitant to share things with you. And so you need to practice, and so do they. And I think we can take this model out into the community where people may not have a lot of trust. And so I think trust and listening go very closely together. So we may have to spend time first of all, building trust by showing that we're listening, by repeating back to people what we're hearing, making sure that we have interpreted things properly, taking good notes, and closing the loop at the end, where if you have a community meeting or some small series of community meetings, you're reporting back to people what you heard at the meeting first. And then within a few weeks or months, you're reporting back to the same group what has changed and what is being done differently as a result of that wonderful input that they gave you. And I think that's the type of communication you should spend your time on, is that constant circle of listening, doing, changing, listening, doing, changing over and over again, and updating people and making sure you're following up.
Mm-hmm. That's great. How can cities and utilities listen well in online channels? Any tips on the virtual listening?
Well, my hat's off to you for doing that digital listening. That's tough. I think it is a great place for us to maybe help us corral some of the topics that we need to be thinking about. And it may give us that issues management that we have to be involved in. I mean, part of listening is issues management. It helps us because it will show us what's coming at us. We can listen to what's going on in communities around us and think about, when's that coming to my town or my water district? And we can see some of those things in digital channels, of course. We can, I think, begin interacting with people in those channels and discerning who are real stakeholders who care about making things better and who are just complainers or trolls who may not even live in our water district or in our cities. But I think we have to interact a little bit to get that discernment. And so I would encourage you, if someone is in the channel over and over again, to try to figure out who they are and see if you can take them offline and talk with them on the phone and maybe calm them down. I worked for an electric utility as a professional on the East Coast. And oftentimes the switchboard person would send all the complaint calls to me because she knew they would never come back to her again. She knew I would listen. I would take notes. I would get back to the person, help them solve problems, make sure that, our hydro dams on the Potomac River weren't making terrible noises that were keeping them up all night long because something was wrong with the turbine or what have you. And so those are the types of things that I think if you've got the right person in the system who can follow up and listen even online, if you can take those offline, see if you can calm that down. Sometimes all we want to do is neutralize people. We may not be able to convince them to believe as we do, but can we neutralize people in some of the channels that we're in, and especially in digital channels where they just kind of go away?
Yeah, those are great thoughts. Another question. What are your thoughts on finding the balance when you do have technical information you can share to inform a decision, but you do want authentic input regarding that process?
I think you've got to get other voices in the system as soon as you start your planning. So you may have the technical expertise and background about how some of these problems are being solved around the country. You may know about technologies that are being used, but you want to make sure that you're keeping your stakeholders abreast of those changes if they're willing to follow you and do some research of their own. Bring them into the conversation as quickly as you can at the very, very beginning so that they can take the journey with you. Don't do the journey by yourself. Take them with you. So as soon as you begin researching solutions or thinking about new technologies or changes that you're making, make sure that they're on the journey with you and make that journey as transparent as you can.
Yeah, starting early. That's a great response. Do you have any suggestions on a good layperson's communications guide with someone that doesn't have a background in communications? So any good resource that can be shared for some of our folks online?
Yeah, I mean, I got lots of books behind me on the shelves here.
Right.
Sometimes some of the basic sort of, I would say more popular marketing and public relations books are very useful just to get an overview of what the lingo is. And so especially those that are taking into account sort of digital spaces for sure. So, you know, I think leadership books are super important too, because I think they help us communicate well. So, you know, Simon Sinek has a lot of good stuff out there. The book that I just talked about, sort of Restoring the Soul of Business and Staying Human in the Age of Data. This is a book that came out in January of 2020, and he actually is talking in the book about viruses and things, like kind of right before the pandemic hit. That's Rashad Tabakawala. That's a book that a lot of advertising people are reading right now and thinking about. I just heard him do a presentation on it last week, and I'm a part of a big group that is trying to keep current with like the best ways to explain hard things to people. As I think about some other resources, I'm happy to share a couple of book titles with you, Dustin and Helen, and then maybe you can share it with the participants in the symposium.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One more final question. How any suggestions on doing general public opinion polling, like without the use of phones, or what are your suggestions on getting the feel of public opinion?
Right. I mean, I think, you know, quick polling is great. Like it might just be 5 questions instead of a big, long survey. You know, there are companies that help utilities and cities do this. We work with one through our program here at TCU called Flash Vote, but I know there's other programs similar to that one. But basically, the premise of these types of outreach, I think, is, do you have 3 minutes to help make your water district better? Or do you have 3 minutes to make your city better? And can you answer 5 questions for us and build the biggest panel you can of people that you can verify who are in your city or in your district? Make sure you're not, you know, getting like thousands of people who've been organized by somebody else coming in and taking those polls and surveys. And so that means, I think, spending some time doing really good hygiene on your databases and making sure you have good databases of users who are in the system that you can reach out to directly, who are like through your bill paying system or something like that. Instead of the old bill insert, you know, you can maybe have some basic information, and always every month have a poll in there of things that you're thinking about, and get that feedback on a regular basis and use it to inform other things that you need to find out about, or the ways that you might build more community engagement or more community discussion around certain issues. So that's what I would say. And the other part would be, you know, you should be writing for like a 7th or 8th grade reading level on everything you're doing for educational purposes. So you can go online and use systems like the gunning fog index is one place where you can take your writing and what you're producing in terms of your content and paste it into that system and figure out what grade level it is. So again, you know, a lot of you have technical jobs and you're way up here, and you really want to make sure that you're, you know, writing and communicating in a way that's easy to get. Like, you know what? I have a PhD and I love stuff written at the 5th grade level. Yeah. I need stuff that's fast and easy. So find the right words, find the right ways to connect, get some scientific input, and build this wonderful architecture for your organization so that you can keep doing all the good work you're doing out there.
Well, Dr. Lambiase, that was great information, great answers. We really appreciate your support and being with us today. And thank you so much, and appreciate everything you've done for us.
No, happy to be here. Thanks again for including me, and have a wonderful conference, folks. I'm going to hang out for a little bit too.
Thank you so much.